From the Downtown Tyler Visitor Center, this is Roses and Weeds. Welcome back to Roses and Weeds. I'm Julie Goodgame, one of your hosts. I'm the City Communications Director, and I am joined by...
I am Stephanie Franklin, the Deputy City Manager.
And we're here today to talk about our favorite topic. We do an episode every year. It's so exciting. This is budget.
And
we've got two very special guests with us today to talk budget. First, you all know and love him. You probably saw him on TV recently talking about budget. Our city manager, Ed Broussard. Ed, say hello.
Hello. When y'all said that this is your favorite subject, and people were like, all right, parks again. So kind of ruined that. I am glad to be here once again for this year's budget discussion and what's going on with our programs and services for fiscal year 2025.
Wow.
Fiscal year. Don't you love that phrase? And we've also got another special guest here with us. And I'm gonna let you introduce yourself because you have a title that I don't always say right. So tell us who you are, what you do, and what you do in the budget process.
So I'm Blake Cathy. I'm the Senior Management Analyst for the city. And in the budget process, I help departments go through their budget and look for items before we get into the meetings. We look at supplemental requests for new and exciting programs and see where all that fits into the money that we actually have to spend.
And how much money is that?
I think this year we're at, $255.9 million as the total budget?
Yes, and we can say that with more certainty.
Yes. Well, I didn't have my book in front of me.
Our budget for the year is $255.9 million for the year ahead, and we're going to dig into that with this podcast, but also with the budget presentations and discussions that we're doing.
I just wanted to point out that Blake is an intern. He has not officially made it to this is his first podcast. So just so you know, I had to be an intern for my first few podcasts.
But we're fast tracking.
But we're fast tracking you
because he's on this podcast. So we're going to do a budget video with Coach Cathy. He's going to teach us all about the budget and civics.
Spreadsheets are so fun.
So get ready because Blake is going to be here for a while.
Coach Cathy. I like that one.
I know. I do too.
No.
I think it's going to
You introduced originally Blake like I introduced people to my wife that I don't remember their names, which, hey... Would you mind introducing yourself? Yes. That way I can catch it as well.
Blake, I remember your name.
That was their name.
Blake, this is how we treat all first-timers.
It is. So sorry for the hazing.
Yeah.
Just happy to be here.
Yeah. Just happy to be here.
And it for this very fun episode that our listeners love, because we're going to talk about so many numbers, but also what they mean. And hopefully we'll get to the place of understanding of how important they are to our programs and services. And so with that, let's jump into this year's theme. This year's theme is All of Tyler. And Ed, what do we mean when we talk about All of Tyler?
You know, All of Tyler was this kind of special, it's a special phrase, especially in relationship to Mayor Warren. Mayor Warren, when he ran for mayor a couple of terms back, that was his theme, was All of Tyler. He wants to make sure he represents everyone that lives in our city, in all the different neighborhoods, the businesses that are here, that he is part of All of Tyler. And as we were kind of looking at what we were building in this budget and kind of the work that we've been doing, especially the direction we've received from mayor and council for this budget and the programs and services we provide, All of Tyler kind of really came back up as part of something we were seeing that was being built in this budget. That is something there, people are like, oh, what's the big thing that y'all are doing in the budget? And there's lots of different projects and programs and capital projects being done throughout the entire city. But the big piece is how we are improving services and touching the lives of everyone in Tyler. It truly is a budget that kind of reflects of our kind of call to serve message to take care of everyone in Tyler throughout all parts.
Okay. I like that. And with that, I'm going to go a little bit off script.
No, there you go.
There we go. Look, I'm going to toss
I'm scared.
Paper.
Just throw it out the window.
Throw it. I'm still going to, it's comforting. So let's lead with that. Let's talk about what's in this budget in terms of services. What's new? What can residents expect to see? And let's just kind of go by area. And I know first and foremost, we always prioritize public safety. So let's talk about what we're doing there.
That's a great point because we have a strategic priorities list or kind of that we work with. And public safety is one of the big ones that we have on there. In fact, when we break down the budget and talk about it in presentation style, we lead with our strategic priorities so that council can go through and understand of those, kind of how those are divided up. And so for public safety, especially when we're talking about public safety, we're talking about those police and fire functions. That's the ones that pretty much everyone thinks of when they think about the city for the most part, because they're the most visible. And they're also the ones that we depend upon the most during our times of need and crisis. And so when we kind of started looking at then how do we enhance our fire department and our police department and our other public safety functions, we really started to look to see for just the equipment and the training pieces of where is there opportunities for improvement. On the fire side, it's an interesting one in that they have been working, especially under Chief Coble, for the past 8 years or so, on a replacement schedule that really digs into and changes up our fleet to make sure that at every station there are fire engines that are ready to roll whenever the call comes in, and that they are modernized, that they're ready, they've got the tools needed to be able to help, whether it is a crash vehicle that they got to get somebody out of, or where there's a burning structure that they've got to get people out of. And so the thing that we found this is so odd, though, is that it's, back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I'm talking about now 10 years ago or so, you could get a fire engine within about 9 to 12 months. You have your specifications for it, you'd send it in, manufacturers get it built, send it over to you by Christmas, and you'd be happy to go with that new fire engine. Nowadays, though, especially post kind of COVID and the changes we've seen in the way that, as far as just supply chain works, has gone from 2 years for construction, kind of from a couple of years ago, to now to about 3 to 4 years for construction of new fire engines. So we're beginning the purchase of a new fire engine and fire ladder with this year's budget. But we actually won't see those fire engines rolling in for another probably about 38 to 40 months before they come in. But we got to go ahead and get them under order now. That way we're actually able to get them at a better cost than you are going to get in the future as those fire engines continue to build up. In fact, those 2 fire engines alone are a $2.6 million investment that the city is making into our fire department. We're doing some things in relationship to the fire training facility where we're building a new Class A burn building. This is one where they actually have the fire and the smoke that goes in there, so that when firefighters, we can put them through there and they can actually get that experience and kind of make sure that they have that feeling and understanding. So when we put them into a real fire, they know what to do, they know how to handle it, they know what to look for, and that constant training allows for them to jump into those emergencies so quickly and so well. And by the way, just as a reminder, our fire department is a Class 1 rating with ISO, which is the Insurance Standards Organization. And that is only about, 1% of, as far as fire departments in the U.S. that have been able to achieve that 1 rating. That's kind of that thing that everyone kind of pulls for and pushes towards, and the fact that our fire department has achieved that goes to show just how really an incredible job that they do, and how they are kind of the top of the tiers when it comes to fire departments in the United States. But that's from training, it's from having the tools necessary, the resources to be able to jump in and be able to handle those crises as needed. A little bit about this, as far as the fire training facility. A lot of people see the fire training facility, especially now that football season kicks off again. There are a lot of people probably wondering, why is there a fire training facility next to the football stadium? We do need to relocate it. We've worked with Tyler ISD. That's something that they know especially is kind of that has better opportunities and use for that area. The city agrees with that, especially with all the work we've done with remodeling the Rose Complex. So actually with this next year, we're looking at purchasing property for the relocation of the fire training facility from where it's currently housed next to the football stadium, between the football stadium and the baseball stadium, to another location that maybe is probably a little bit more industrial in nature or the like. That way it's probably fits in a little bit better having that fire training facility there than it is kind of in a very high area where tourists and guests and all those, and we're trying to put our best foot forward as far as our community. The other part of that, though, is this Class A burn building, we want to make sure it's portable so that we can take it to our new facility. The other part of it is also something people probably drive by all the time and don't really think that much of, and that's fine, is over on Old Bullard Road at Old Bullard and Reek is Fire Station Number 2. Fire Station Number 2 was built back in the day when cattle and stock ponds and all that were over there, where now apartment complexes and commercial structures are standing. And so that fire station was built kind of in the mindset that there wasn't a whole lot going on over in that area of Tyler when it was constructed. Well, that area sits in the middle of one of probably our densest commercial districts in Tyler. And so we need to be able to, for the equipment needed to be in that fire station and the areas that's needed. It's still a great location for a fire station, but we're going to need to remodel it and really tear it down all the way back down to the foundation and build it back up. So we're looking at what we can in this next year to be able to build a new fire station there. We'll need to either do a temporary fire station kind of in that general vicinity, or kind of split the crews out to the fire station on Cumberland Drive and Shiloh in order to kind of backfill the area. So we have our priorities. We'll work those and see what we can be able to achieve. But fire station number 2, people will see as far as construction on, first demolition of, and then building up of a new fire station over there, probably a 2-story structure because of the size footprint that we're dealing with.
We love our viewers love demolition. So,
it's nothing better than tearing stuff down
so you can build them back up. Well, it sounds like, and always when you talk about fire, we also have to talk about police. I'm going to ask Coach Kathy over here. Tell us what's going on with police this year. What should we expect to see?
So one of the big things that we have with police this year is out on the east side of town, the National Guard had their army there for years. It's actually, since they've built the new facility on the spur on 31, that building's been sitting out there vacant. City owns the land, and we're getting the building back by the end of the year. So over the past couple of years, we've put money in to build up our training facility for PD, and we're the region's training facility for police departments. Now we're wanting to relocate our facility from downtown out there so they have more room to go through the training that they need to go through. It's a big open building, so they can do a lot more stuff than what they can currently in there.
Our force is CLIA accredited, and that's only the top 3% in the nation get that accreditation. So the fact that I think the last few budget cycles we've talked about the continued investment in training and training the Tyler way, but also making sure that we're training those from neighboring communities that are going to be there. The Tyler, that's a high standard.
It is. And then we're sitting, and I keep staring out the window because we're downtown. So the next part for PD is we're looking at adding 2 police officers dedicated to the downtown beat. Now this is contingent upon a few things, one being funding from the federal COPS grant, which helps us pay for these police officers for about 3 years. And then the other piece that we're looking at is, of course, the funding after those 3 years. And we're working right now to see if we can't get the tax increment reinvestment zone downtown to help pay for those police officers once that COP grant goes away.
What's the acronym for that?
TERS.
TERS. So if you
Yes.
hear us say TERS a lot in the future, define it one more time.
Tax increment reinvestment zone.
Yay.
But what about if you have to take it out of the TIF of the TERS in order to make it work?
The bureaucrats.
Yeah. That's
we love our funds. We love our acronyms for funds. What is the TIF of the TERS? Is there a TIF of the TERS?
So the TIF is the tax increment fund. And so that's the piece that actually, it's almost like there's the street the bank is on, but then there's the bank. And so the fund is actually where the money is.
Okay, I got you. And the zone is what's collecting the money.
And now
Okay.
people have moved on to the next podcast.
Yeah.
And then they were like, this is too much.
Well, that's why we should move on to quality of life.
We
What?
should. That's
Yeah,
a great segue.
great segue.
Let's talk about, because there's a big project.
Yeah,
it's on
not-
everyone's mind.
Not that I'm biased, but I feel like
And you're-
quality of life is,
And you're the one to talk
where
about
it's at.
It's always interesting because we love police and fire.
We do. They do.
It's a huge part of our budget.
Huge part.
Although at the same time, the less we have to, I don't want to have a firefighter come to my house. I don't want a police officer to stop me. I want them to go help other people.
I want them to stop other people.
Yeah, that's exactly. But I want to enjoy quality of life.
Yes, you do. And you want to do it safely.
Yes.
So it is important to have police and fire.
So let's talk about our big quality of life project, of which, as you said, we hope to have 2 police positions dedicated to, and that is downtown. So Stephanie, tell us all about what we're going to see this year.
Oh my gosh.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. There's a lot happening between now and the end of 2026, probably going into 27. We will completely invest in a new green space on the square that'll have a new restroom facility, playground equipment, not equipment, but sort of a sitting play area, Shorty the Squirrel statue. It's going to be super exciting. Open play field, and then it'll connect over to the brand new courthouse on the east side of the square. And then, the most important thing I feel like is the redevelopment of all of the streets downtown and the sidewalks so that they're wider, restaurants, retail can spread out onto the sidewalk, have that sense of community when you come downtown. Just, it's time to take a look at all of our facilities downtown and, make sure that we're living up to the standard of being the best in East Texas, which is Tyler, Texas, and the best downtown in Texas.
A lot of that for those watching this on Channel 3, if you can see out the window behind me, that's going to be this side, right?
It's going to be this
the
side
of the square.
Mm-hmm.
So
the brick streets will stay, because I know that's something that a lot of folks have asked about, and our mayor is very passionate about brick streets. So we're going to pull up that brick and reuse it.
I think that's an interesting piece, like you talked about, for the pulling the sidewalks out, the landscaping that will go on there.
Yeah.
And for someone, who's follically impaired like I am, the more trees and shade cover that you can provide downtown that definitely enhances the ability to be outside. It cools the conditions. My goodness knows we were out today for kind of the groundbreaking for the new courthouse, and it was about 10 degrees cooler in the shade.
Definitely.
And so, especially down here in Texas, to have that is kind of the trees that you were talking about, the streetscaping, the ability to now have, like I said, just kind of cool down the conditions.
Benches, furniture, so you can
Yes.
lounge, eat your ice cream, walk around. A lot of people are like, why is it so important that we work on downtown? But private investment follows public investment. So and we've seen that with the new parking garages that both the county, has invested in, the city had invested in, maybe 10 years ago now. And so, that's what's going to spur all of the redevelopment. And even the small pieces that we're seeing now, the Wilcox has come online, what Plaza Tower's done here, the apartment complexes that were built near City Hall. I mean, there's just so much going on residential. And they also need a place, a green space that they can hang out and have a sense of community at. So it's a real exciting project.
Go ahead.
I think that's a very important point, because the interesting thing that we've seen here in Tyler has been this kind of a little bit of public investment and then large amounts of private investment.
Right.
With all of the different, as far as residential that's down here now, you mentioned as far as with the Plaza Tower and People's Petroleum Building and just all those different parts, as well as just remodeling of other facilities and buildings around downtown. And so one of the things that I know when we work with our groups, especially our private investors downtown, that's the piece they've said is, look, we've spent millions on our buildings and our facilities with the intent that you're going to come behind us and at some point build, as far as work on the public side, in order to make it something that's impressive for both guests and the people of Tyler to be able to use and enjoy. Now, the financing of that is an interesting piece, because people, we'll probably talk about taxes and all this other stuff in a minute, and we'll be shaking our fists at each other. But the piece, though, that how you were able to put together the financing for this, I think, is interesting.
Oh, you're telling me. Yes. Okay. I will talk about the financing. So the city is using some half-cent money, which is sales tax money that we get from the folks that come and spend money in our community and buy goods and services. And then we are using some of our ARPA funds. Blake? Hit it. What ARPA means.
Remind people what ARPA is.
American
Rescue Plan Act.
Rescue Plan Act.
Federal grant funds is
Yeah,
typically
federal-
how I would say it.
Okay, there you go.
Yes.
Federal grant money. So we're also using some federal grant money that we received. So we're combining those funds and making a big splash downtown with the money.
And it's going to be great. And it's going to have roundabouts. And if you have feelings,
Oh, thank you, Julie, for mentioning
If
that.
you
I
have
completely forgot.
feelings about roundabouts, you can email us at publicrelations@tylertexas.com, and we will read those on a future episode. I promise you.
Also, we did a traffic study.
Yes.
And they came recommended. They are for traffic calming, because we're asking people, when you come into the core of our downtown, just slow down a little bit and look out for pedestrians. So it will be interesting to all educate and understand how traffic calming circles will work.
I'm a fan. I've gone places.
If you've gone anywhere in Europe,
Yes.
you've been on a traffic calming
they're,
circle.
they're really cool.
If you've watched European Vacation, you've seen a traffic circle.
Yeah,
so-
that's right. We were talking about that the other day.
Yes.
Look, kids, Parliament.
Yes, Big Ben Parliament. Yeah.
Now,
Big Ben Parliament.
and as someone who gets frustrated with the red lights, and that's the piece of you're doing away with those red lights. And so when I'm like, how come I'm hitting every red light? The beauty of the traffic circle is you're not hitting the red light. The lights are gone.
Continuous.
There is continuous movement there that kind of moves the traffic through, so that you're sitting there in that line of traffic, you're not longer sitting there in that line of traffic. The line of traffic is moving and being able to kind of keep itself going through there. Now, this is coming up next year, right, Stephanie? I feel like
Yes.
I'm going to be
Yeah.
an interviewer all of a sudden.
Well, we all flip the script
Yeah.
sometimes. We are
So what's
starting.
kind of the schedule?
Yeah,
So-
we're hoping to break ground in January. We're going to be bidding the project out this fall, and then we're about 75% through with the construction drawings, and then we'll bid it out, and then we hope to have a big groundbreaking ceremony in January, probably into January, and then hit the ground running.
Now, if you're like me and you're wondering just what the heck is going on, how can I find out? But I don't have Stephanie Franklin's
Phone
cell
number?
number to say, Stephanie, what is going on now? Where could I go and find that information?
You can find that information on Create Tyler.
But from createtyler.com, you can find out about the city and the county projects of what's the status, what's going on, what roads are going to be closed when I go downtown, what roads are open.
It's going to be a
Where do
little.
I have to wear a hard hat? Where can I not wear a hard hat?
It's going to be a little painful, but we're all going to get through it together. We're going to come together as a community and rally.
I think some of our restaurants maybe even give you a 10% discount if you wear a hard hat.
Wow.
I'm just throwing that
Don't
out there.
start rumor mill. No, debunk the rumor.
So what other parks? We've got some other quality of life stuff.
do.
Got some park stuff,
You
Ed.
got some good
That's
all
right.
of Tyler Park stuff.
Yeah.
All of Tyler, indeed. In fact, now that we have received Texas Department of Transportation funds to be able to build Legacy Trail Phase 2, which kind of starts as a trailhead at Stewart Park over on Frankston Highway and leads all the way up pretty much up to the Rose Complex, that gives us the first start of being able to get into that area to create a kind of neighborhood park over there in that location. And so that starts to serve the west side of our city. And so for this coming year, using funds that we have from our Parks Improvement Fund, which is funds that we have generated through over at our landfill, the additional fees that we charge those from outside the city who use the landfill and to put back into our regional park facilities, we'll begin the construction of Stewart Park over there. And so this is something we're very excited about just some of the trails that will be internal to the park and the ponds, places to go have picnics, that type of environment for our community to be able to go and enjoy. So this will be a whole brand new park that's kind of coming online from property that was donated to the city and with funding coming from our Park Improvement Fund, and that we are very excited about. We've done, and I'll say this, our Parks and Recreation Director, Leanne Robinette, has done an incredible job of getting out there and being able to touch nearly every park as far as improving it throughout all of Tyler, north, south, east, west, central, all places in between. Pretty much every park has had some level of improvements, if not major significant improvements to it, that we now kind of move forward with this next piece, which is the actual construction of a new park that is going to be very exciting for us. The other interesting piece about our parks piece, and this is it's interesting, it's under quality of life because it's actually taking out trees, but Mother Nature has been very, very bad to us.
Yeah, she's been
over
angry.
the past few years. Yeah, she keeps throwing things at us. Now, we do a great job of trying to, once she throws stuff at us and it hits us in the head, of kind of picking ourselves back up off the ground and then moving forward. What we're trying to do is being able to make sure our Parks Department has the funding to specifically on the trees piece, and you don't want those hitting on your head. But when they are falling, being able to get those out of the way, getting clearing, having spent a lot of time on over the past couple of years, as well as make sure they have the equipment to be able to do that kind of tree removal and when we have these type of crises and emergencies that we've been having with some of these weather events. The other piece on there, I'm just going to go ahead and keep flying through. It's going to be about the
going.
Rose Complex. I know. I'm on a roll, and we ain't stopping.
Quality of life, man.
Yeah, it is quality of life. And tell you what, Rose Complex, with the improvements made from Phase 1, that just has improved the quality of life of our community immensely. The new, as far as conference center and the utilization of it, has been just very impressive at the amount of groups, both locally as well as especially from throughout the state, that have come into Texas to be able to use that facility for all kinds of purposes. Everything from your usual banquets and dinners to putting in gymnastic mats and having essentially Olympic level events going on in there. The Mayfair Dance Hall. We opened that up this spring, and that was just an incredible event. There was a couple of older ladies that I helped into the facility who remembered going in there like in the 40s and 50s when they were really young, and just the dances that they would go to and some of the stories they shared. And for them to go into this building that they hadn't been into, obviously, for about 60 years, 70 years, and seeing it restored to what it looked like just kind of almost brought tears to their eyes and for mine as well. Just kind of, it really was emotional. And so that's, having that restored and being able to have that back and fully into use over there has been just really just incredible for us. Now, Now we started with phase 2. People are always like, okay, you got that done. Now when's the next thing you're doing? And one of the things that we have to be honest about is our hotel occupancy taxes have been down, and we are very conscious of when we look at our revenues of where there are ups and downs and where we need to make modifications and changes in our services to be able to handle that. And so with hotel occupancy tax revenue being down, we've kind of put off phase 2 probably for about 2 to 3 years, maybe a little bit longer, depending on what we see our forecasts as. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop as far as with some of the just work that we need to go with. We're putting funds aside to be able to do the construct or tearing stuff down, and we talked about it earlier. People love it when we tear stuff down. So a couple of the buildings over there getting torn down in this coming year, and we'll keep looking at where we have opportunities for improvement with kind of limited resources on that phase 2 component to kind of keep that marching forward. So before we start doing something significant in the next, probably like I said, about 3 to 4 years over on that project.
Which will kind of be in harmony with what you said earlier. TISD would like us to get the burn buildings and stuff, and we would like to do that as well. So our partnership could continue, all around the same time. Hopefully that we make some big changes over there.
Harmony and synchronicity, that's what it's all about. That's what we do.
And partnerships.
And partnerships and other people's money.
Thank you.
That's something we all
partners.
All work on.
Exciting things happening here in Tyler. When we come back from break, we will talk about infrastructure, our favorite word, infrastructure. Specifically, we'll talk streets, drainage, and water. But right now, a quick commercial. But right now,
Welcome back to Roses and Weeds. I'm Stephanie Franklin, your co-host, and we are talking all things budget City of Tyler.
that's right. And so the second segment, we're going to do infrastructure. And that's such a fun word.
It is.
That word.
Infrastructure.
But let's talk about what that means. And first up is streets and what we all care about, right? Streets, and especially in Tyler, we care about traffic. So, Coach Kathy,
You're up.
You're up.
Disclaimer,
Tell us.
I'm not a real coach. Just since it keeps coming up, I won't put that out there.
But he really does know numbers. He is good with numbers.
So I'll start in
But
streets.
your wife was the Yam Queen.
Oh my
So
God.
if you're Coach Kathy and the Yam Queen, that's a Taylor Swift song right there.
When you start bringing the personal lives into the
Well,
mix.
I
I'm going to be in
mean,
trouble.
the Yam Queen is that's a big deal.
It really is.
I don't know if you guys
married-
know this.
I have to admit, my wife is not royalty, and I mean she's a very wonderful woman. But you married royalty.
Katie, I'm sorry.
Me too.
Streets.
So let's
Traffic.
start with streets. And I'm going to touch back on something that we brought up earlier with, Parks talking about the weather events that we've had recently. And so this year, while we were working with our street department on their budget request, one of the things they brought to us was we only have one street crew tree crew in streets that consists of 2 people. And when we have major weather events, it's those 2 people and then volunteers from other crews that help them go clean up our right-of-ways and our streets. But we've had a Brick Street crew for years that has sat vacant because we've started using a contractor to help us with our Brick Street repairs. And so this year we thought, you know what, let's use those positions and make some new tree crew positions. So one of the big things in streets is we're converting some positions over to help with efficiency, help them clean some stuff up, get some things together so that when we have these events, they're prepped, they have people in place to help us get back to normal quicker. One of the things that we have an issue with here sometimes is pay. And so they have some labor positions that have stayed vacant, open for years. And so we're looking at converting those over to help them get back to where they can take care of one of the biggest pieces of infrastructure we have in the city, which is our streets. And then for traffic, we started 5 years ago on our intelligent traffic system plan. And each year, part of that plan, we have to go back in and add maintenance because we don't ever want to just drop money into capital and then once we paid for it, not take care of it, because it's how we get back into the situation we were over 5 years ago when we started our ITS plan. So we've increased funding there. We've also looked at converting some of their positions to help them streamline so that when we have traffic issues, when we need to get traffic signals back up, they're able to get to the issue and help our citizens quicker.
Very cool. Lots of good planning, lots of good conversations going on and outcomes. Let's talk also. So, streets and traffic, there's kind of two components to there's the maintenance piece, but then you brought it up, there's capital. Ed, tell me, capital, half
Yeah.
cent. Talk about half cent.
You know, capital is also a fancy word.
That's true.
And we often throw, just like we did terrorist tips and other things.
And everyone's going-
It's like I've worked here too long. Now
Yeah.
I can't speak with
We're
the
all
voice
like,
of the
let's get
people.
all CIP in on this one.
Yeah.
For capital, when you hear us talk about things like CIP, which again, that's one of those little acronyms, Capital Improvement Program, what we're talking about are those, essentially those big infrastructure or building projects that we do throughout the city. So, we have what we call our operations, and that's the stuff you see us doing day in, day out. But then there's the stuff where we actually tear things up or build things up, and that's usually what we refer to when we talk about capital. Now, an interesting piece on this one, especially back to traffic, you were talking about a second ago with Coach Kathy. The piece on the traffic is an interesting one that we're not really tearing anything out or building anything up, but as much as we are investing into as far as just, new technology. And this one for about the past year, or no, this is really for about now, 3 to 4 years, under our traffic engineer, Cameron has been doing an incredible work in regards to going in and the guts that are in all of those boxes that you see around town next to the traffic signals, of replacing the stuff that's in there to be able to have things that communicate together, work together, and be able to then, so that the traffic flow works as it is actually designed, and it doesn't stop you at every red light. And so that one is part of what it will be is a 10-year-long process. We've been, like I said, this is probably about, year 4, 5 that we've been working through this. Probably we'll do another $1.5 million this coming year. We also have the maintenance funds that we're putting forward so that we don't get into a position of then, saying, okay, now we've done that, we've got to go and replace everything over again. We're able to kind of maintain it and take care of it once that investment is fully made over that 10-year kind of schedule that we have for this. The other part of streets is we have streets that we have those that we do crack sealing on and seal coating that we pay for out of the property tax funds that we have, but we also use half-cent sales tax fund to go in and do kind of complete rebuilds on different streets that are needed. Our big one that we just got through with was Cambridge. That one was about an $8 million project overall, lasted for about 2 years, but now it has, as far as better just surface, actual has drainage that occurs there. The drainage just doesn't flood people's yards and homes. It actually goes through the street into drainage systems that are part of that. And so it was a long process. It was an expensive process. But what you end up, though, is a much better product for our residential properties that we have that were around over in that area, for them to be able to live their lives. We were talking about quality of life earlier. A lot of the work we do on this capital projects through the half-cent sales tax fund is improving people's quality of life, but it's being done through the infrastructure piece.
But I like what you said, because it is true. It's quality of life.
Yeah.
But it's really inconvenient. And, Cambridge is a great example of that. That was a painful project for, people living in the area. And, and so much of what we have to, when we're talking about making these really big improvements, you're going in and you're creating workaround, and they're not perfect. You're having to go in and fence things off, reroute, but if we don't do that, we don't get the better quality of life that we could have. And in fact, over time, things erode and deteriorate, and it gets worse.
That is so true. And one of the big investments we're also making is into drainage. In our half-cent sales tax fund for the next coming year, we have about $14.5 million that we're going to be investing into our drainage system throughout the city. That's in addition to the other funds that we have that come for maintenance of our drainage system. And the reason for that, it goes to exactly what you're saying about on the street side. For a long time, we didn't really invest and reinvest into our drainage system. Also, the rains have gotten more intense. We've seen, as far as just more development in our city as well, more concrete put down than was probably down about 100 years ago or so. And so some of these drainage, especially through the central parts of Tyler and some of the other areas, especially as with a lot of them that flow along the creeks, you have a lot of erosion. You have a lot of just damage that's happening around people's yards, around their homes, sometimes flooding of homes. That's always a priority we look at. If there's flooding occurring, how do we move forward immediately to be able to help take care of those problems? If you're having to worry that when you start hearing rain coming down about, oh goodness, what's about to happen to my property? that's not something we want you to be worrying about.
Now, all that said, I do need French drains at my house. I don't know that that's a city project, but if you're offering,
It's an interesting piece, and I'm glad you bring that up, because a lot of the conversations we have and a lot of the work we do is in either relationship to partnerships. Yours isn't a partnership. Yours is actually your own problem.
Yours is private.
But sometimes
That's
we can't kind of give people assist or kind of guidance on, here are some things we're seeing with your property in relationship to either French drains, or whether it's things that we see around the property, or kind of a buildup of just different things, so that, because there is also responsibility that the private property owner has in relationship to their property, and things that they may have done that created drainage problems, or things that are kind of building up that need to get taken care of, so the drainage issues they're having can go away and go into kind of flow with the natural drainage of Tyler into the creeks and ultimately into the lakes.
yeah, and you said it too, like the amount of 100-year weather events, from 10 years ago that we would get versus now, where it's like, oh, we're having 100-year events every year.
Yes, I mean, and our drainage crew does an incredible job of being able to say, hey, what we see, we've now become very sensitive to it, and we monitor it. And when we see bad weather coming, our drainage crews and our streets crews go and hit all of the usual suspects to be able to see, is there any kind of buildup that's occurred there? Is there any trees that have fallen that could be blocking and causing kind of damming up the water? Just anything that the areas that they know about, they go into, so that when the rain starts coming down, and we can reduce flooding opportunities here and do what we can to mitigate those problems. But the thing is, the problem still exists. One of the projects you'll see kind of coming up in this next year is actually over off of Rice Road, where the Glenwood Church of Christ is. It sits there. If you'll kind of look at that Glenwood Church of Christ, it kind of sits with a creek that kind of flows on both sides of it, and a lot of erosion has occurred over the past years as that's kind of sloughed off. And I'm sure there's lots of praying going on in that church that it doesn't erode too fast. Over at the city, we're also doing the same praying because we also though have a capital project that we have coming forward, probably about $2.5 to $3 million, to help with upstream, downstream, and around there, in order to be able to help with the erosion issues that we're seeing, not just with that church, but throughout all of that part of that creek that runs through that property, all the way really from the warehouse facility that they have down there to just a little bit further downstream. But that's just an example of some of the different projects we're having to move forward with, and the kind of cost involved in doing those.
Well, in time too, that one has wetlands involved, right? So you have to actually get the Corps of Engineers. Some of these projects take time because we have to go through certain measures beyond the city to make sure that we're doing this in compliance with state and federal laws and things like that.
Exactly. So you have a lot of other federal and state guidelines that you're following, and drainage is a tricky subject because anytime you are displacing water or making it run faster, which ultimately is we kind of channelize that area, which will probably be the engineer's recommendations, and that will move forward on the construction piece, then you're increasing the flow of that water. And so if you're increasing that flow of that water further downstream, what does that impact? And so you have to measure that and make sure that you know what that's going to be, and just all the way down the line and up the line as well, in case to make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to dam water up runs upstream. So yeah, it's never as simple as the problem in front of you, because there's problems behind you and further down the line that you have to take care and work and mitigate as well.
That's a great segue into our next topic, which is more water. But let's talk about our actual water and sewer projects that we've got coming up this year. We have some great projects that I think our customers have been waiting for, and that after they are implemented, they're really going to see a difference. So let's talk about those.
You know what? That is a great point. With our water and wastewater system, I made mention earlier about the commitment the City Council has on things such as streets and on drainage, and especially they look to see how can we be able to not only really begin the work on those or continue it, but also finding sustainable funding for it to be able to make sure we're doing the right thing, we're balancing those costs with the needs for that maintenance, and also being responsible about the maintenance. Getting the maintenance done now instead of kind of kicking the can down the road. And so the mayor and council, just my hats off to them, both the current ones as well as the past ones, for this kind of continual commitment that's been there on taking care of our infrastructure. And our biggest part of our infrastructure is that water and wastewater. It's the interesting thing, and the mayor Mayor Warren talks about this, about the water lines are underground, the wastewater lines are underground. you don't really see the impact of those miles and miles. And if we stretched it all out, it would go all the way to Atlanta, and kind of similar for our wastewater system. In Atlanta, Georgia, by the way, not Texas. That's not that far. Atlanta, Texas. Anyway, but it is that piece of all that's underground. So you don't think about it, you don't see it, most people don't care about it. They turn on the water tap in the morning and brush their teeth. The water comes out, they put it in their mouth, and then they spit it out. It goes down the drain. And, they don't think about the fact that all of that with the water that was coming out of that spigot, and then as it was going down in that drain to somewhere else, we're taking care and providing for both of that. And that's what all that system is. And we have to make sure that quality water that you're trusting us to put in your mouth every morning, and then also that, just the fact that you're like, oh, well, it surely will drain away, right? And go safely somewhere. That's what we're having to take care of. And that's what we're having to continue to invest into our system for water and wastewater, for those thousands of miles of lines that sit throughout all of Tyler. And that's expensive. Ultimately, at the end of the day, to make sure you're maintaining and taking care of that correctly per federal specifications, per state specifications, and then also for our local expectations, that costs money and it costs time. And so those two things kind of putting in play are something we're always very mindful of. Now, with that, just some of the different things we're looking at, especially for the next coming fiscal year, is what can we do to be able to improve our water quality for our customers. Our water that we get from Lake Palestine, we have water from Lake Palestine and from Lake Tyler. Lake Tyler's got good, clean water. When they kind of flooded that area, there was no trees. They cleared everything out. Lake Palestine was an entirely different story. But because most of our water, though, does come from Lake Palestine, it does have that earthy taste for most of the year. We call it geosmin. And the piece that we continue to work on, and especially in this fiscal year, and then we got as far as a project in here coming up for a taste and odor study and pilot project to continue to work on our filter systems, because you're going to have to, in order to get that earthy taste out, you're going to have to keep filtering the water so that when it finally then hits as far as your distribution system, that you've gotten as much of that geosmin, just kind of taste and odor piece out, so to improve that for the quality of our customers. So that's a big piece we're working on. But there's $28.32 million of water projects ahead of us for this coming year, $21.68 million in wastewater projects for this coming year. We're having to essentially rebuild the wastewater treatment plant that's on the west side of town. And so that was going to be about a 7-year project, but that's going to be about $95 million altogether for the reworking of that facility. So none of this is cheap, none of this is easy, and it is something, as I mentioned earlier, we have to really balance just how fast do we move because the rates ultimately is where the money is collected to pay for these improvements, to make sure that the water system is safe and adequate for our generations to come that are following us.
I think, as you're talking and we're in just before we leave infrastructure, if you're the average.
Do you ever really leave infrastructure?
No, because, it's pretty important until it doesn't work, right?
Yes.
But before we left it, I thought, the average citizen probably thinks, well, how do you make these decisions? How do you prioritize? How do you prioritize drainage? How do you prioritize what water projects you're going to do? And so we also have to pay for professionals to help us do these studies, whether it's a drainage study. And so we have a pretty extensive drainage study that we did, and it prioritizes projects. And that's how we budget for how are we going to spend these funds? What are we going to spend the funds on? And then, there are emergencies that roll into that, and those have been frequent. So, so we've had that on top of just, here's our plan. We've had some additional projects added because they have become emergencies that weren't.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just to kind of give the public a sense of how do you even prioritize all this money and how you're going to spend it and where.
That's a great point. In fact, especially on the emergency side, we have different projects that may have to be a few years out. And this is especially true on water and wastewater, but it's also true on drainage and streets, of where, the repair, we look at the amount we're spending on repairs, especially continual repairs. And we decide, let's see what we can do to move this forward and have this actually maybe a full-scale replacement or at a capacity or whatever it might be, in order so that, that the project may have been 5 years down the line. But because we're looking then at what are the costs of the continual repairs that we're making on this, and just the frustrations with that, as well as popping up on some of the regulatory groups or agencies of their kind of their radar of it is better maybe that money to be spent on moving that project up to now than to continue to band-aid it until you can get to the project.
We're always shuffling, reprioritizing depending on the condition.
But to what you said, that planning is so important. And to that end, we actually have a pretty big plan continuation coming up. Coach Kathy.
You're on deck.
Yes, and so we have our comp plan that will be starting.
What is comp plan?
Comprehensive
plan.
Sorry,
Yes,
he's an intern.
I am an intern. I am an intern.
Is that City of Mount Pleasant comp? It's,
No.
okay.
No, it is the City of Tyler comprehensive plan, and this will be, Julie said it's a redo. I mean, it's
a
really,
full.
It's a redo. Like we did a comprehensive plan in 2007, and that was, and help me out here, that was Tyler 21 to begin with. And then
Right.
we came back and did some updates, and it became Tyler First. And now this one will move on from there and look at really what we want to see as a community happen in Tyler over the next 20, 25 years.
Yeah, those plans there's a 20-year planning horizon usually. And so much of demographics have changed. As so much has changed about Tyler, we're getting younger, the expectation of housing products and what types of roadways we want to drive on and what kind of parks do we want to see. All of the things that make a community is what we're going to be talking about in the plan.
And technology has changed.
Yes.
Like how we live our lives. It's so different now than 2007 when I was in my 20s.
How we live, how we get around, what type of industry we have. I mean, it's changed so much that this will have a full community survey where everyone can express their thoughts and opinions on what the community should or would or could look like in 20 years.
And also that survey will get the pulse of where are we today? What do you think right now about how we're doing business as a city?
Yeah.
And then where can we improve and where do we want to go?
And so as more details about that come out, we'll definitely be talking about this more on the podcast and making sure we're advertising and publicizing how you listeners participate in this plan, because we need every one of your voices. You are Tyler, Texas, right?
It's for all of Tyler.
It is for all of Tyler.
Yeah.
We'll have public meetings. We'll have stakeholder meetings with businesses and industries that are here in town, employers, so that we can get, a variety of feedback.
That's
a
important.
project.
It's a 2-year process for the comp plan and the work that's being done on it. And the interesting thing, and we've kind of talked to some of our different partners, each of our kind of other agencies or groups that we work with does their own kind of version of this. Tyler Junior College, UT Tyler, our hospital systems, each of them have their own master plans. Their master plans of what the campus looks like, the master plan of their services, where their service levels are going. And the piece that we talk to them about is how then our comprehensive plan work we're doing, how that all functions together. How it all then, we kind of take their plans as well as what we hear from the community, our neighborhoods, all of those, and bring those together in this comprehensive plan to kind of lay out the future 20 years of Tyler. What does that look like? Heather Nick, our assistant city manager who's managing this project, and she pulls out her cell phone and goes, in 2007, the first cell phone was introduced. And for me, 2007, again, it feels like, well, that wasn't that long ago. It was a long time ago.
And so much changes so quickly.
And it has, though, especially when we think, people ask us about just, you think about the use of neighborhoods and how that has changed from just residential. We all lived in our neighborhoods. A house was a house. You lived there, or it might have been rented out. You might have owned it, whatever it could be. The idea of an Airbnb of a house in a neighborhood, you would have just looked at somebody and like, what are you talking about? Now, that's become more and more commonplace. And you have these different type of functions, and especially y'all talk about technology and the way that is changing our lives and our communities, our neighborhoods, and how we work on things and how we interact with each other, and then how even our neighborhoods what uses happen in our neighborhoods, uses happen in our commercial districts.
Okay, well, we have talked about a lot of projects on the horizon, on the immediate horizon. And the big question now that must be on your mind is, how will we pay for it all? When we get back, we will dive right into that topic and talk money. But first, this commercial break. And talk money. First, this commercial break. And we're back with Roses and Weeds in downtown Tyler, talking all things budget. And we have gotten to the last segment of this show, and the one that all of you care about, and that is the money, honey. So let's talk tax rate.
All right.
City Manager Ed Broussard, our proposed tax rate is lower, but we're collecting more. Tell me all about that, but real quick,
Okay. Yeah, so property taxes is always the thing people, it's the state about to have a legislative session start up, so you'll be talking about property taxes ad nauseum. It's the thing you get multiple things from the appraisal district, so it's always on your mind. My wife always talks to me about it, and I'm like, look, that's the appraisal district actually is not part of the city. All that then comes to where for the property tax rates of what we are able to determine. And as you may mention, it's kind of a weird math that we are actually proposing a rate of 24.0085 cents per $100 valuation that will support the budget that we have that's put before the city council for consideration. That pays for about 32% of the general fund, which is your police, fire, parks, library, streets, the stuff that you're not directly paying for. And so that rate, though, of 24.0085 cents is actually lower than the current rate, which is 24.7920 per that $100 valuation.
Impressive.
Yes. And so with that, though, that lower rate, though, because of the way that state laws are determined, that's actually a tax rate because valuations went up in Tyler about 10%. The average home value went from about $233,000 to $255,000. Now, these are all on averages, so everybody's property is going to be different. The rate that we're putting forward is that rate, like I said, that brings in the funds needed from the property tax side to pay for the services that we all use. But that's only, like I said, 32% of the budget. Our biggest part is actually sales tax. That's 42% of the budget is sales tax on the general fund, is sales tax, and that's what it goes towards. But on the property tax rate, which, by the way, is still one of the lowest property tax rates in the state of Texas, that is one of which is what we're proposing for the city council.
Yeah, and it's lower by over a half. Sometimes what ours is like a third of a similarly sized city. Places,
some of our closest competitors are places like Sugar Land, which have about 32 cent tax rates. And the interesting piece about our tax rate that I always love to kind of brag about is because of the half-cent sales tax rate that we have and how we use our half-cent. Most places have a half-cent, but they use it for economic development and other programs and services. That's been able for us to essentially not have any debt associated with our property tax rate. So for when you pay property taxes to Smith County, when you pay property taxes to Tyler ISD, or whatever ISD that you're part of in the area, there is a debt component that's part of that. Every penny we bring in goes to operations and maintenance. So when you're when you're writing that check for your property taxes, what you're sending to the city of Tyler is directly paying and only directly paying for that police officer on the street, for that firefighter that's waiting for that 911 call to come help you out on, for the parks that you're going to enjoy, for the streets that you're driving on. All of our money goes in those operations and maintenance for our general fund services.
And you said in most of our general fund is made up of sales tax, and sales tax did something interesting this last year compared to the prior 2 years. So talk to us a little bit about that and what we're kind of forecasting for this one.
This past year we saw sales tax drop, or this current year that we're in, as compared to previous years. Even during COVID, we had 1 month that it would drop once kind of the economy shut down, so to speak. But then after that, it went back to kind of raging and roaring and ready to go. But then somehow, back in October timeframe of last year, it all started to slow down. There was lots of reasoning for that. We saw just kind of a slowdown in our sales and use taxes that we received from the activity here in Tyler. This past month, which we started to see it, kind of picking up a little bit again, but we felt like we've hit a new floor. So we've kind of rebuilt the sales tax revenue stream forecast to kind of reflect that new floor, plus about a 1.5% increase, which is what the Texas Comptroller's Office is kind of forecasting what they expect to see for this coming year.
All right. So we've talked property tax, we've talked sales tax. Now let's talk water rates. Coach Kathy?
So for water this year, we are proposing to do rate increases. Most of that is directly linked to, what we talked about earlier with the projects. In order for us to pay for the projects that need to be done, projects that were outlined in the water and wastewater plans we just completed and presented to council this past year, we need to go up on the rates to help pay for those. There'll be both a base rate, which is what you pay if you use no water, and a volumetric rate, which is dependent upon how much water you use, increase this year. And they'll affect everybody differently because we all use water differently depending on size households you have, if you water your grass, items like that. And depending on how much you use, we looked at a couple different scenarios. So a user that uses 2,000 gallons a month, which is usually one or two people in a house. We don't have a big yard to water. We may not water at all. It's about a $10.90 increase. And then we looked all the way up to a 12,000 gallon user, which is going to be a little bit bigger household, may do some watering during the hotter parts of the year. And that's about a $24 increase that it would go up. Like I said, that's related to the operations to provide the quality water that we have and then perform those capital projects that we know need to happen to keep our water system at the levels that we need to provide the quality service that we do.
And those calculations, those include like your stormwater fee, your sewer fee. So that's kind of like all of that calculated together, giving you those kind of guidelines about what to expect, right?
Yes.
And one thing we're not going up on this year is the environmental compliance.
Regulatory compliance.
Regulatory,
Yes.
yeah.
And so with our debt that we have to do for the capital related to the consent decree that we entered into in 2017 with the EPA, there is a specific part on the bill that's called regulatory compliance just for that. And this year it'll stay at 1970. We're not doing any increases to that. But all of this can be found. We created a little one-pager that's on the front page of the city's website right now that goes over what an average 8,000 gallon user of water and wastewater can expect to see on their bill. And that, I think we're calling that our...
Wait, I can pull this up. Hold on.
Do you have the exact title?
I've got it. It is Budget Explainer.
Oh,
Better.
even better. Yeah.
Budget
Yeah, much better than
Explainer.
mine.
So you can download that, view and download that one-page budget explainer. It also we have that, and then we have a link to the Truth in Taxes website, so you can kind of calculate what your tax bill is going to be based on your unique appraised value. But if you want to get just a good idea and understanding of what your annual increase is going to be based on the tax rate, based on the utility rates, go there. Look at that information. You should be able to get a pretty close estimate to what you're going to see.
And it also has a breakdown of what the charges on your water bill are for, so it
Yes.
will explain a little bit better too if you have any other questions on that.
And it's funny too that you bring that up, because one fee that's on there that sometimes we forget is our solid waste or trash, and then also recycling. And then I know for me, I'm not going to see a charge for recycling for over a year, because our Rivers Recycling, our third-party facility that we would send to, they had a fire and they have to rebuild. It's going to take that amount of time. So right now we're taking all of our recycling to the Tyler's Recycling Center down on Bodark, and that's what we're using. But also, if you have special pickups, bulky item pickups that have had charges related to them, you can also see that on those bills. And depending on when you called that in versus when you're billed, I know I was talking to someone recently and they were really trying to figure out this extra $40 charge, and it turned out that they had that pickup done. So all that is to say, look at your bills. It's always a good idea to look at those breakdowns every month and remember to remind us what we're all paying for.
Yeah, it's always amazing. You can get a lot of different services from, especially Tyler Solid Waste, but those services each have a direct cost to that. I think sometimes people forget that when they call in for the special pickup, or if they have a certain if they have different things brought to them or whatever. There are costs incurred with that.
And I will say, one of the few cities still that twice a week pickup. That's
very rare.
very rare.
Yes.
And finally, we're going up on some fees, special service fees. So who wants to take this one?
So it's it's one of those kind of very similar to the conversation we just had in relationship to solid waste. There's the regular pickup cost that you have, but then when you ask for something special in addition to that, there's a fee that's associated with that because it's an additional cost. The people driving those trucks actually don't work for free. And so we kind of look that way for a lot of the different services we see and making sure that we're able to, because we have the lowest tax rate, because some of the different services that are needed have just kind of a direct benefit towards a certain customer, that those fees are being charged appropriately for that. So having said all that, a couple of different things that we've been tackling are in relationship to parks. You'll see, the one that kind of sits out is the amount of vendors that have been using our parks to put on vendor shows. And Bergfield Park especially, right there at 4th Street and Broadway, is a prime commercial spot, but that's an actual park. And it's supposed to be there for the enjoyment of all. And so with a lot of the different vendor shows that have been happening, we want to make sure that what we can is, one, that we're charging appropriately for the amount of activity, for what it takes for us to take care of those activities, and perhaps charging a fee that also makes it to where when they look at those, go, is this show that I'm putting on, or this essentially art festival or whatever, is it going to be able to have the cost recovery needed in order for me to pay for the fee that's associated? So right now we've kind of put forward a fee of $300 for these vendor shows that go in those locations. For typical users who go out there for the birthday parties and all that, those type of fees we're kind of keeping at the same level they were at. So it is nothing that we're trying to outprice those guys from being able to go out there and reserve a space so they can go be able to have a party and for their friends and family. This is really aimed more at, kind of like I said, those regular vendor type shows that are popping up and utilizing our park. So kind of a tiered system for what those costs are based upon really, the kind of what it takes for us to take care of those. The other one that's going to pop up is going to be in relationship to fire inspections. For our commercial structures, our fire department used to provide an annual fire inspection. There was fees associated with everything, but the state law changed to where you needed to have those certified as far as the inspectors, and so we kind of pulled back on that program. Well, we're being able to bring that program back. It does look to be about a $50 per year charge for those commercial businesses to be able to have this kind of commercial inspection that will go in, look to see are there any fire hazards, getting the chance for the firefighters to familiarize themselves with the buildings so that if there is an incident that's occurring, they know how that building kind of functions, the interior components of it. But also it helps sometimes our businesses be able to not have a fire, whether it be pallets of kind of rags all around them and possibly some fire accelerant near them. We kind of see and have found those incidents after fires have occurred, and it's one of these where inspections we may be able to help mitigate some of those instances so that back doors aren't blocked. You're able to kind of things that could possibly start a fire or accelerate a fire are reduced or eliminated. And so that's an annual inspection, but that has a fee associated that we're bringing forward.
Okay. Well, there's a lot to this budget.
Yeah, and we really didn't talk about it all, but you can find all the information on our website.
That's right. In fact, if you go to cityoftyler.org right now, the whole homepage is devoted to all things budget, including the hearing schedule. So we have 2 public hearings and an adoption scheduled, and those are going to be on August 28th, 9 a.m. down at City Hall. And then at September 11th will be our second hearing and the adoption. So that is your opportunity to come down and speak on this topic.
I often use this kind of as an analogy for the budget. The budget is the story of what we want to do this coming year. Most people look at this and they're going to look at those fund statements and they're going to see numbers upon numbers and they're going to go, I'm out. But the thing is, and this is the great thing about this podcast and the opportunity to talk about it, is there's so much beyond the numbers. Once you understand what those numbers mean, once you understand what the intent of the programs and services are and how it's improving our lives. That's the whole reason I got in this business, really. One, my mother made me promise never to get into teaching. She is a teacher, as is my father, and they said, stay away from public education. But the piece just the need to be able to be involved in being able to improve the lives of our neighbors, of our friends, and those in the community, that some of which we will never meet. That's what this budget story tells. This budget story tells how we want to improve the lives of all of those people that make up all of Tyler. The 110,000 people and the 250,000 people who come in every day, that it is one of where these are the things that in the 12 months ahead of us that we are going to move forward with and to work on in order to make sure that their lives are more successful, their businesses are more successful, that their families are more successful. That's, ultimately we talked about infrastructure a minute ago with the water and the sewer and all that stuff that's on the ground and that we build up and things like that. All that infrastructure is there to support the infrastructure of this community. And that infrastructure of the community are the people, the businesses, the churches, the civic clubs, all of that different part that makes up their communities that then we interact with and we're part of and we see, and ultimately, moves us forward as a city, as a place for a home for people for decades to come.
And that is a great place for us to end our show today.
moves
I want to
us
thank
to
my
as a
co-host Stephanie
place,
Franklin and
for
our
decades
guest
to come,
Blake
these
Cathy,
that then
who
we're
our
part
pseudo
of,
coach,
and we see,
AKA.
moves
AKA,
us
and City Manager Ed Broussard. And we will see you here next time. Our
on
pseudo
Roses and
coach,
Weeds.
AKA.
AKA. We'll see you here next time.